The question is not whether Tywin Lannister knows. He always knows. The question, the only question that has ever mattered in the game he plays with such cold and practiced patience, is what he chooses to do with what he knows. Ned Stark has found the truth. He has looked at Joffrey's black hair rendered golden by Lannister blood and understood what that rendering means. He has gone to the histories, run his finger down the lines of inheritance, and arrived at the only conclusion the evidence allows. And in arriving there, the Lord of Winterfell has made himself a problem. Most men, upon creating such a problem, would act swiftly. They would send a blade in the night. They would arrange an accident on the King's Road, a fall from a horse, a fever that comes on suddenly and resolves with equal speed. Tywin Lannister is not most men. He stands at the window of his solar in the Tower of the Hand. For he has come to King's Landing quietly, without announcement, because his son Jaime is in the city, and because Tywin Lannister does not trust his children to handle complexity without supervision. And he looks out over the rooftops as the evening light turns the stonework amber and considers not the problem Ned Stark represents, but the opportunity. There is a boy on the wall. This is the thought that settles in him like a stone dropping into still water. There's a boy on the wall, and that boy is Eddard Stark's bastard, or is claimed to be, and the claiming itself is interesting. The boy is called Jon Snow. He has gray eyes and dark hair, and he was brought back from the south in the arms of a man famous across the 7 kingdoms for his unbending honor. Tywin does not believe in honor. He believes in leverage, and in the distance between what a man says he will do and what a man actually does when the right pressure is applied to the right place. Jon Snow is not a loose piece. He is a piece that has not yet been moved. That is entirely different. He turns from the window. His master, not the maester of Casterly Rock, but a man of his own choosing, loyal in the way that only men who owe their position entirely to one patron can be loyal, stands near the door. Tywin speaks without preamble. Send a raven to Castle Black, not a king's raven, my own. The maester does not ask why. He has learned not to ask why. The offer Tywin drafts is short. It is not flowery. He is proposing a marriage alliance between Jon Snow, bastard of Winterfell, ward of the Night's Watch, and Myrcella Baratheon, princess of the 7 kingdoms, daughter of the king. He is not asking permission. He is not requesting an audience. He is informing the boy on the wall that a door is opening and that the boy must decide whether to walk through it or remain in the cold. The letter takes less time to write than one might expect for a document that will reshape the political architecture of the known world. Tywin seals it with his own seal. The lion, not the crowned stag, not the direwolf. His seal, his offer, his move. Cersei finds out, because Cersei always finds out, and she comes to him the way she comes to all confrontations she believes she will win. With fury held just barely beneath the surface, visible in the angle of her jaw and the particular stillness of her hands. She is beautiful when she is angry. He has always known this. It has never moved him. You are giving Myrcella to a bastard, she says. Not a question, an accusation. I am giving Myrcella to the north, he says. There is a difference. He is no one. He is nothing. He is a base-born boy freezing on a wall at the edge of the world. Tywin looks at her for a long moment. When he speaks, his voice has the quality of stone under pressure, not breaking, not yielding, simply demonstrating that it is harder than whatever is pressing against it. He is Eddard Stark's blood. He may be more than that. He does not finish the sentence. He does not need to. Cersei's eyes change. She understands what the unfinished sentence contains. She understands, and she is afraid. And her fear is the first useful thing she has offered him in some time. The North remembers, Tywin continues. Robb Stark will raise his banners the moment his father falls. And Eddard Stark will fall. You have ensured that much at least. When the boy in Winterfell rides south with his father's sword and his father's grief and 40,000 northern spears behind him, we will need something the Starks value more than vengeance. Cersei says nothing. Myrcella is that something, he says simply. The raven leaves at first light, carried by a rider who will change horses 3 times before reaching the King's Road's northern branch, because Tywin does not trust a bird alone with something this important. The rider carries 2 copies of the letter, one for Jon Snow, one to be burned if the rider is intercepted. Somewhere beyond the wall, the cold deepens. Somewhere in King's Landing, a girl of 8 years sleeps without any knowledge that her grandfather has just placed her at the center of a gambit older than she is. And somewhere in the dungeons below the Red Keep, Eddard Stark sits in chains he does not yet know are coming, and the pieces have already begun to move. The letter arrives on a Tuesday, which means nothing in the world beyond the wall and everything south of it. The rider comes hard through the snow, 3 horses spent behind him and frost in his beard, and he asks for Jon Snow by name at the gate of Castle Black, not for the Lord Commander, not for any ranger or steward, but for a bastard of no particular standing who happens to be cleaning stables when the gate guard finds him. That detail alone tells Jon something. Tywin Lannister does not send exhausted riders through northern snow to deliver letters to no one. The seal on the parchment is the Lannister lion pressed deep in gold wax, and Jon holds it for a long moment before breaking it, his hands still smelling of horses and hay, aware that whatever is inside has already changed something. Even before he reads a word, he reads it 3 times. Then he reads it again. The offer is written in clean, formal language that leaves nothing to ambiguity, because Tywin Lannister understands that ambiguity is a luxury men extend to their equals, and he is extending none here. Legitimization as Jon Stark, Lord of Winterfell. The words are right there on the parchment, ink on vellum, as real and solid as the wall rising above him. In exchange, the letter outlines a betrothal, formal, binding, to Myrcella of House Lannister, first daughter of the Queen, 3rd in succession to the Iron Throne, and beneath that, a pledge, fealty to the crown. The Stark name, restored and redirected, turned into an instrument of Southern policy. Jon folds the letter carefully, precisely, along the same creases it arrived in, and goes to find Mormont. The Lord Commander reads it without expression, which is its own kind of expression. His face is the face of a man absorbing a blow he anticipated in some general sense, but not in this specific, devastating form. When he sets the parchment down on the table between them, he does not speak immediately. The fire in the grate pops once, sharp as a cracked branch. Outside, the wind moves along the top of the wall in a long, low moan that has no beginning and no end. You understand what accepting this means, Mormont says finally. He does not finish the thought. He does not need to. Jon understands. He understood before he walked through the door. Accepting means the oath, the words he spoke before the gods in that cold yard, the vows that bound him to the Night's Watch and the Night's Watch to him means nothing. Or rather, it means something he is choosing to place beneath something else. That is its own kind of meaning. If you are enjoying this alternate history of Westeros, please make sure to subscribe because I upload new stories every single day. Now let's get back to the story. A man does not break a sacred oath by accident. He breaks it by deciding that another obligation outweighs it. And the deciding is the worst part, because it cannot be undone. But Mormont is not finished. He leans forward, elbows on the table, and his voice drops to something that is almost kind. Refusing also means something. He says, "You understand that too." Robb is already moving. That much has reached them even here, in dispatches and ravens, and the whispered intelligence that travels between castles at the speed of horses in winter. Ned Stark's arrest has lit something in the north that cannot be unlit, and Robb Stark is the torch, young and grief-bright, and riding south with more men behind him than the south has seen from the north in living memory. Winterfell sits behind him, half-emptied, its castellan capable, but its seat unoccupied by any Stark with a name that lords will follow. Bran is a child, Rickon younger still, and Jon, the one who shares Ned Stark's face if not his name, stands here in black wool on the wrong side of a wall, technically dead to the world that needs him. Mormont does not tell him what to decide. He is too honest a man for that. But he stays in the room long enough that Jon understands his presence is itself a kind of counsel. Not permission, not absolution, but the acknowledgement of a man who has lived long enough to know that clean choices belong to songs, not to the lives of actual men. Jon spends the night on the wall itself, standing at the top of the great lift where the cold is absolute and the darkness beyond is a thing of enormous patient weight. The torches along the battlements throw small circles of amber light that do not touch each other, islands in the black. He watches the nothing beyond the edge of the known world and thinks about his father sitting in chains he does not yet know are coming. He thinks about Robb riding south with a sword and grief, and no idea that somewhere in King's Landing, an old man with cold eyes is already arranging what comes after the battle. He thinks about a girl of 8 years who does not know her name is in a letter. He does not sleep. Dawn comes anyway, as it always does, indifferent to the night a man has spent inside it. The reply goes south at first light, carried by the same rider who arrived with ice still in his beard and who now rides with the letter sealed in plain black wax. No sigil, because Jon Snow has no sigil yet, though that is precisely what is about to change. The letter contains one sentence. Mormont watches from the yard below as the rider clears the gate and says nothing and goes inside. The old bear does not report Jon Snow's desertion until the 3rd day. The letter arrives in King's Landing before the blade does. This is the calculation that matters. Not sentiment, not mercy, not any quality that anyone who has spent an afternoon in Tywin Lannister's company would waste breath ascribing to him. The letter arrives, and Tywin reads the single sentence it contains, and something behind his eyes shifts. Not warmth, never warmth, but the particular stillness of a man who has just confirmed a suspicion he has been carrying for 17 years. He folds the letter once, precisely, and holds it over the candle flame himself, rather than trust a servant with the burning of it. He watches until there is nothing left but a thin curl of ash collapsing in on itself, and then he rises and he goes to find the king. What he finds instead is a boy in a crown giving orders he cannot take back. Joffrey has already signed it. This is the piece Tywin had not fully accounted for. Not the order itself, which he expected, but the speed of it, the eagerness, the sheer undisguised pleasure on the boy's face when he stamped his seal into hot wax. Ned Stark is to be taken to Baelor's Sept and executed before the crowd that has gathered. It is a performance. It has always been a performance. And Joffrey wants the applause. Tywin does not argue with the king. He does not argue with anyone when argument would be wasteful. What he does instead is invoke, with precise and unhurried language, the authority of the hand of the king. His authority, not Ned Stark's, because Ned Stark is no longer anything except a prisoner whose continued existence is now a strategic instrument in the hands of the man who understands its value. He frames it as mercy. He uses that word deliberately, lets it hang in the air where Cersei can hear it and the small council can hear it, and the story can begin to form its own bones. The king's grace, he says, the king's wisdom in choosing life over death, in choosing the wall over the block, in choosing a lesson that endures over a moment that ends. Joffrey does not like it, but Joffrey is 13 years old, and Tywin Lannister is standing in the room, and there are things even Joffrey understands without being told. Ned Stark does not die on the steps of Baelor's Sept. He is taken instead through a side passage, stripped of his title in a brief and procedural declaration that contains nothing resembling ceremony, and handed to a column of Lannister men who have their orders and who follow them without question, because men in Lannister livery have learned that the cost of questions is higher than the cost of obedience. The crowd that gathered for an execution disperses confused, trading rumors the way people always trade things they do not fully understand. Some say the king showed mercy. Some say the hand intervened. Some say Ned Stark is already dead, and this is all theater for the North. None of them are entirely wrong, which is how Tywin prefers the world to be arranged. The journey north takes weeks. The Lannister escort moves at the pace of men who are not in a hurry because they have already won, steady and unhurried through the changing autumn light, through villages that go quiet when soldiers pass, through landscapes that grow rawer and colder with every day's riding. Ned Stark sits his horse with his wrists bound before him and says almost nothing to the men around him. He does not ask where he is going. He knows where he is going. The wall is not a mystery. It is simply the end of the world in a different shape than death, and he rides toward it with the particular stillness of a man who has already made his peace with loss and is now simply occupying the time between this moment and the next inevitable one. He does not expect to see Jon. This is, perhaps, the one thing Tywin arranges that contains something adjacent to kindness, though kindness is not its purpose. The column pauses at Castle Black for a single night, ostensibly to rest and resupply. In reality, it pauses because a living Ned Stark, who has had no contact with his bastard son, is a man with nothing left to lose. And a man with nothing left to lose is a man who might decide that a Lannister arrow in the dark is preferable to the wall, and Tywin has not intervened in an execution only to have his instrument destroyed by despair in a roadside ambush. He needs Ned Stark alive, and he needs Jon Snow to know it. The meeting is brief. It is conducted in a stone room lit by a single lamp with 2 guards outside the door who have been told to stand far enough away that voices do not carry. Ned looks at his son, at the boy who is not, has never been, quite what he told the world. And Jon looks back at his father, and neither of them speaks for a long moment that contains 17 years of something that has no clean name. Then Ned leans forward, and his voice drops until it is barely breath. He says the names: Lyanna, Rhaegar. He says them the way a man confesses something he has carried so long, the weight of it has become indistinguishable from the weight of himself. He says them quickly, precisely, watching Jon's face the way a man watches ice he has just stepped onto and is not yet certain will hold. He does not explain everything. There's not time, there's never time, and some of it Jon will have to find for himself. But he says enough. The dragon, the wolf, the secret at the root of everything. Jon does not speak. He sits with it the way stone sits with cold, absorbing without showing. And Ned watches his son become something else in the span of a minute. Watches the framework of the boy he knew settle and crack, and very quietly begin to rearrange itself around a different center of gravity. The lamp between them throws shadows that shift when the draft moves through the room. After a while, Jon says, very quietly, that he understands. Ned searches his face for the lie and does not find one. What he finds instead is something that frightens him more than grief would have: a stillness, a calculation, a quality of attention that does not belong to the boy he raised at Winterfell, but that he has, God help him, seen before. He has seen it across feast tables and war councils. He has seen it in men who survive things that kill other men. He has seen it in the eyes of Tywin Lannister. Jon asks one question before the guards return. He asks whether the Lannisters know. Ned does not answer immediately. The lamp flickers, and then he says he does not know, and that is the most terrifying thing he has ever said aloud, because it means that the letter and the commuted sentence and the single night's pause at Castle Black may not be mercy or strategy or coincidence. It may be something else entirely. It may be the opening move of a man who already knows what his opponent is holding and has built the entire board around it. The guards knock twice, and the door opens, and the moment ends, and Ned Stark is taken away down the corridor toward the wall and the cold and the rest of what remains of his life, and Jon sits alone in the stone room with the dying lamp and the knowledge that has just rewritten everything he thought he was. He sits there until the lamp goes out. The raven arrives at dawn. It comes in over the tree line from the east, dropping hard and fast through the gray morning air, the way ravens do when they have traveled far and fast, and do not have the luxury of a gentle descent. The camp is still half asleep. The cook fires just beginning to catch. The breath of 10,000 men rising in pale columns above the frosted ground. It is one of the watchboys who spots it first, and he does not yet know what it carries, only that it bears the black wax of a Meister's seal, and that the scroll tied to its leg is thick. He does not open it. He runs. By the time the letter reaches Robb Stark's tent, 3 lords have already gathered without being summoned, as if they sensed a shift in the air the way horses sense weather. Robb reads it standing. He reads it twice. He does not change expression the first time. The second time, something moves behind his eyes, not grief, not relief, but something more complicated than either. Something that has to do with understanding that the world has continued making decisions without him. Ned Stark lives. That is the first fact, and it rewrites everything below it. Ned Stark lives, and he is bound for the wall. And Jon Snow, Jon Snow, who was never supposed to hold anything, who was raised in the in-between spaces of legitimacy, who has spent his entire life standing one step outside every room he entered. Jon Snow is to be betrothed to Myrcella Baratheon, a princess, a Lannister by blood if not by name. The words sit on the page like a wager laid down by someone who is very certain they have already won. The lords are loud about it immediately. That is the nature of lords. The Great Jon's voice is the loudest because it always is, and because he is the kind of man who measures the force of his conviction by the volume at which he delivers it. He takes his cup, a good pewter cup, heavy, the kind that has traveled 6 campaigns, and he drives it against the nearest tent post hard enough to leave a dent and send the wine in a dark arc across the canvas. He says it is a trick. He says it plainly and without apology. He says the Lannisters have discovered what frightens a Stark most and are dangling it like meat above a dog's nose, and that any man who slows his march because of a piece of paper deserves what comes next. He does not finish that thought. He does not need to. Robb lets him speak. That is something that has changed in recent months. The patience that has grown in Robb Stark, like a callus over soft skin. A younger version of him, a boy version, would have argued back immediately. Instead, he stands at the center of the tent with the letter still in his hand, and he waits. And the waiting itself is a kind of authority. When the Great Jon is done, when the echo of the throne cup has settled, Robb speaks in a register that is quieter than anyone expects. He says they will wait for confirmation. That is all he says at first, and the simplicity of it lands harder than any counter-argument could, because it does not concede anything, and it does not deny anything, and it does not give anyone a clean surface to push against. They will wait for confirmation. The march halts. The offensive pauses. Because if there is a chance, even a fraction of a chance, that the letter is true, then the calculation changes, and Robb Stark is the only man in this tent who has spent the last several weeks truly running calculations. He finds Catelyn later, when the lords have dispersed and the camp has settled back into its uneasy morning rhythms. She is sitting with her hands folded in her lap, in the way she sits when she is deciding something she has already decided. He does not ask her what she knew. He asks what she thinks, which is a different question, and she understands the difference. She is quiet for a long moment. Then she says she never trusted Jon. She says it the way a person says something they have held for years and have finally stopped seeing the point of hiding. Not cruelly, but precisely. She says Jon was always Ned's complication, and she always understood what complications cost a family. But she also says, and here her voice changes slightly, gains something, a reluctant architectural quality, that if the marriage holds, if it is real and not theater, then there is a Stark at King's Landing with a Lannister name attached. There is leverage. There is a thread running south from Winterfell that is not a sword. She does not call it hope. She is too careful for that word. Robb sits with her until the morning opens fully and the frost begins to melt from the tent ropes and the sounds of the camp shift from waking to working. He tells her he has promised the lords that if the Lannisters break their word, the North will rise again. Harder, he says, and colder. She nods. She believes him. That is not what worries her. What worries her, she says, is that Tywin Lannister already knows that, and built something to survive it anyway. She picks up the letter from the table between them and reads it a third time, and her eyes stop at Jon's name and stay there. The road south takes 11 days. 11 days of Lannister gold cloaks riding in tight formation around a single rider in gray wool. And the gray wool is new, cut in the northern fashion, but trimmed at the collar and cuffs with silver thread. Stark silver. Someone has been careful about that. Careful enough that Jon notices it immediately when the garments are laid out for him the morning of departure, and he understands without being told that this is a costume as much as clothing, a message sewn into fabric. The Stark in him, made visible and deliberate for a court that will be watching from the moment he passes through the gates. He rides without complaint. He keeps his face still. The Lannister men do not speak to him more than necessity requires, and he does not ask them to. King's Landing announces itself before it appears. The smell arrives first, vast and human and overwhelming. The accumulated breath of 500,000 lives pressed together inside walls that were never quite large enough. And then the city rises on its hills, and the Red Keep crowns everything above it. And Jon feels the weight of it settle across his shoulders like something physical. He has never been south of the Neck. He has never stood anywhere that did not know the taste of real cold. This place knows nothing of cold, and it watches him arrive with eyes that are already calculating, already sorting him into categories of useful and dangerous, already deciding what he is worth and to whom. The court receives him with the precise warmth of a blade recently sheathed, smiles that are architectural, courtesies that cost nothing and offer less. He is brought through halls of pale stone and colored glass to an audience chamber where lords and ladies arrange themselves with the practiced ease of people who have spent their lives understanding that positioning is meaning, that where one stands in a room is a declaration. They watch him. He watches them back. He does not perform for them. That, more than anything, seems to unsettle the ones closest to the door. Tywin Lannister receives him in the Tower of the Hand, and the room is exactly what a room built by that man would be. Spare, purposeful, every object earning its presence. Nothing soft, nothing decorative that does not also serve. Tywin stands at the window when Jon enters, and he turns with the unhurried deliberateness of a man who has never once moved faster than he chose to. He studies Jon the way a general studies a map, not for beauty, not for sentiment, but for what it tells him about distance and resistance, and where the roads run. He does not waste time. That itself is its own kind of statement. He lays out the terms without preamble, without softening, without the courtesy of pretending this is a negotiation. Jon will be legitimized by royal decree before the month is out. Jon will marry Myrcella Baratheon in a ceremony that will be witnessed by lords from every major house still possessed of functioning eyesight and political memory. Jon will take Winterfell as his seat once the North is formally secured, and the North will be formally secured because Robb Stark will stand down, because Catelyn Stark has already read the letter, because the mathematics of the situation allow no other outcome, and Jon will owe House Lannister a debt that Tywin does not name yet, because unnamed debts are worth more than named ones, and Tywin understands value the way other men understand air. Jon listens to all of it. He does not interrupt. When Tywin finishes, the silence between them has a texture to it, something taut and mutual, two men measuring the same distance from opposite ends. Jon says he wants to know one thing. Tywin says to ask it. Jon says he wants to know whether Myrcella was consulted. The question lands in the room like a stone dropped into still water, and for a fraction of a moment, something moves behind Tywin's eyes. Not surprise exactly, but recalibration, a small and rapid adjustment of whatever model he has been running. He says the girl understands her position. Jon says that is not what he asked. Tywin looks at him for a long moment and then says, with the measured economy of a man granting something he had not planned to grant, that she was informed. Jon holds his gaze and says that he will speak with her himself. Tywin does not agree. He also does not refuse. He moves to his desk, and the audience is over. The royal gardens in late afternoon hold a quality of suspended light, golden and slightly melancholy. The kind of light that makes things look more permanent than they are. Myrcella is sitting beside a low stone fountain when Jon finds her, and she stands immediately with the automatic poise of someone who has been trained since childhood to rise when someone enters a room, and then she seems to remember herself and stands very still, and her eyes are green and measuring and very carefully not afraid, though the fear is there underneath, structural, load-bearing. Jon does not bow with the elaborate performance he has seen other men offer in the halls. He bows simply, as one person acknowledging another, and then he says the thing that is true rather than the thing that is correct. He says he did not ask for this either. He says he thought she should know that. The fountain runs between them. Myrcella's carefully composed expression holds for 3 full seconds, and then something in it shifts. Not breaks, but opens very slightly, the way a locked door opens when someone finally tries the right key rather than forcing it. She says quietly that everyone here performs for her. Jon says he does not know how. She looks at him with something that is not yet trust, but is the shape where trust could eventually stand. And she asks him what the North is like. And her voice when she asks it carries something genuine underneath the question, something that is reaching for something real. Jon opens his mouth to answer her, and the fountain keeps running, and the gold light thins toward evening. The sept of Baelor receives the morning like a held breath. Light comes through the high windows in long pale columns, catching the dust that rises whenever anyone shifts their weight on the stone floor. And the stone floor is cold even through the soles of expensive boots, even in summer, the way old stone holds its coldness, the way old houses hold their silences. The great space fills slowly with people who are performing the act of being present at a significant event, which is different from being present at one. Lords arrange their expressions. Ladies arrange their sleeves. The gold cloaks stand at their posts with the particular stillness of men who have been told the exact cost of moving. Cersei arrives early and sits as though the seat was built around her. Her gown is deep crimson, a choice that is not coincidental, and her eyes are the color of shallow seawater over cold rock. She does not look at her daughter more than is necessary. She looks at everything else: the positioning of houses, the quality of attention paid by men who matter, the angle of Tywin's jaw when he settles into his seat and folds his hands in his lap and becomes the most still object in a room full of still objects. He is satisfied. He does not display satisfaction in ways that ordinary men would recognize, but it is there in the precise economy of his movements, the way a man who has moved the world one careful inch allows himself to stop pushing for exactly one morning. He watches the proceedings the way a craftsman watches finished work. Not with pride, which is too soft a word, but with the particular attention of someone confirming that the joints have held. Joffrey sits to his mother's left and sulks in the boneless, elaborate way that only the very young and the very powerful manage, sprawled against ceremony like water, finding the lowest point available. His eyes follow Jon Snow down the aisle with an expression that is not merely dislike, but something more calculating underneath the dislike, something that has been watching and measuring and filing things away for later. He is young enough that he has not yet learned to hide this. He will learn, or he will not, and the world will proceed accordingly either way. Jon walks through the sept with the same quality he carries everywhere, which is the quality of a man who has decided to be exactly as large as he actually is, and no larger. He wears Lannister crimson against his dark coloring like a man wearing a language he is still learning to pronounce, and he does not look comfortable because he is not comfortable, but he does not look diminished by the discomfort. Ghost was left in the chambers at Tywin's careful suggestion, which was not a suggestion. Jon had understood this. The direwolf understands absence better than most creatures, and waits. Myrcella comes down the aisle in gold and ivory, and the particular composure of a girl who has been trained since childhood to present a surface while keeping the interior somewhere private and intact. She is beautiful in the way that Lannister women are beautiful, which is to say, completely and without apparent effort, though the effort is enormous and invisible. She does not look at the crowd. She looks forward, and then she looks at Jon, and something passes between them that has no name yet. It is too early for a name, but it occupies the space where nothing was before, and that is its own kind of information. The ceremony proceeds in the way of ceremonies, with words that are older than anyone present, and weighted with a solemnity that belongs to the words themselves rather than to any of the people saying them. 7 blessings are spoken. The cloak passes from one set of hands to another. Jon's voice when he speaks, the vows is quiet and very even, the voice of someone saying something true rather than something ceremonial, and Myrcella's voice answers with the same quality underneath the formality, and the High Septon watches them both with an expression of mild professional surprise. It is done. It is done, and Tywin allows himself one breath that is slightly slower than the one before it, and Cersei does not cry, because Cersei does not cry in public and rarely cries in private, and Joffrey examines his rings, and the great space of the sept holds the moment for exactly as long as moments are held, which is never as long as anyone wants, and then it releases it, and the court moves toward the feast hall like water moving toward an opening, and the day continues, 1 hour following another, in the way that days insist on doing regardless of their content. The feast is the feast of a family that has decided to perform contentment, which is to say it is excessive and loud and furnished with every variety of distraction. Tables groan with the weight of what has been spent on them. Wine moves from jug to cup to mouth in a continuous river that will not stop until well past midnight. Musicians play in a corner with the focused invisibility of people who have learned that the powerful do not want to be reminded that entertainment requires labor. Tyrion finds Jon in the way that Tyrion finds most things worth finding, which is to say with the appearance of accident and the reality of intention. He comes sideways through the crowd with a cup in each hand and a slight elevation to his eyebrows that is the closest thing he has to a welcoming expression. and he offers 1 cup to Jon the way a man offers a proposition, with curiosity about whether it will be accepted, and with the answer already half calculated either way. He says quietly enough that the nearest courtiers catch only the shape of words rather than their content. That of everyone in the Red Keep, Jon is the only person he has encountered in recent memory who has managed to be honest in the presence of Lannisters and survived the experience. He pauses. He adds that this is a sample size of 1, and Jon should not extrapolate too broadly from it. He tilts his cup. Jon looks at him for a moment. There is something in his face that is very close to a laugh, which is different from a laugh but related, a first cousin of 1. He takes the cup. He says he is not sure he has survived yet. Tyrion drinks and says that surviving is mostly a matter of continuing to do it, and the trick is not to stop. Jon drinks. The feast moves around them in its enormous decorative way, and 2 men who have been made peripheral by the ambitions of others find themselves briefly, accidentally in the same place, and the mutual recognition of that is not warmth exactly, but it is something that warmth can eventually grow in. It is the right kind of soil. Later, when the torches have burned lower and the feast has passed through its loudest register and begun its long exhale toward quiet, Jon and Myrcella are in their chambers, and the bedding ceremony has not happened, because they have agreed on this without discussion, which is itself a kind of discussion. The kind that happens when 2 people understand the same thing at the same time without needing to name it. The agreement was simple and complete. Neither of them wanted to begin whatever this was with performance. Neither of them, it turned out, knew how to perform in that particular way, which made them unusual in the Red Keep, and perhaps, in this specific matter, suited to each other. The fire is lit. The room is warmer than Jon is accustomed to. He sits in the chair near the hearth, with the loosened collar of his formal clothes, and looks like himself again in a way he has not looked all day. And Myrcella sits across from him with her hair partially undone and her composure reduced from its public form to something smaller and more genuine. And the silence between them is not uncomfortable. It is a silence they're both trying to figure out what to do with, which is also not uncomfortable, just honest. Jon talks about the wall. He does not mean to at first. He opens his mouth and finds the North already in it, the way the North is always in him when he stops filling himself up with other things. He talks about the stars as seen from the top of the wall, which is unlike stars seen from anywhere else, because there is nothing between you and them. No trees, no hills, no roofline, just the cold and the dark and the light of things that are impossibly far away. He talks about the cold itself, how it is not a single thing but a vocabulary of things. The cold of early autumn, when it still has politeness in it, and the cold of deep winter, when it has no interest in being polite, when it moves through walls and clothing and decision alike. He talks about the silence after snowfall, how it is not the absence of sound, but a presence, a weight, something that presses gently on the world and holds it very still. Myrcella listens with the particular quality of someone who is actually listening, not assembling their response. Her eyes are on him, and they are open in a way that her eyes are not open in public, where they have a surface on them, a gloss of careful visibility. She says, when he pauses, that she has never been north of the King's Road. She says it simply as a fact, but there is something underneath it that is reaching. the same reaching quality Jon heard in her voice when she asked about the north in the garden, as though the question is connected to something older and longer in her than the moment that produced it. She says she wants to see snow that is not in a name. Jon looks at her across the firelight, and something settles in him that has not been settled in a very long time. Some continuous, low-grade bracing that he carries the way travelers carry packs, so habitually that he has forgotten the weight of it until this moment when it eases fractionally. He does not know what to do with this girl who is not what he expected and is not what she was presented as. This girl who is something more complicated than either the political asset or the Lannister daughter, who is reaching for something genuine in a place that has long since traded genuine things for useful ones. He says she will see it. He says it without strategy, which is the only way he knows how to say things, and Myrcella receives it the same way. And the fire between them burns down another quarter inch, and outside the window, the city of King's Landing makes its nighttime sounds, and somewhere in the Red Keep, Tywin Lannister is still awake, reviewing accounts or correspondence, or the interior map of a future he is drawing one line at a time, and Cersei is in her chambers with wine and cold thoughts, and the grinding calculation of what comes next, and Joffrey is asleep with his hands curled like a child's, all the performance dropped, just a boy in the dark. But morning is coming, and morning will bring what mornings in the Red Keep always bring, which is the resumed pressure of everything that wants something. And there are eyes on this marriage already that are not Tywin satisfied ones, and in the north, the name Snow still means something to people who did not attend this wedding and were not consulted. And the wall stands in the dark at the edge of the world, and beyond it, something very old moves through the trees, patient and enormous, and not yet finished waiting. The morning comes with all of its weight and none of its mercy. The court session is already crowded by the time Jon takes his place at the edge of the hall, standing where newly elevated men stand when they are still learning the geography of where they belong. He does not yet sit among the great lords. He stands near enough to be seen, far enough to be reminded. He has been navigating these distances for weeks now, measuring the space between what Tywin intends for him and what the court is prepared to accept. And he has learned that the distance closes slowly and that patience is the price of the closing. Joffrey sits the Iron Throne the way he always sits it, like a boy who has been told repeatedly that the chair is magnificent and has decided to embody its magnificence through posture alone. He surveys the hall with that particular expression he has perfected, the one that suggests boredom and appetite at once, a king looking for something to prove. He finds Jon Snow without appearing to search. The comment, when it comes, is not subtle. Joffrey has no gift for subtlety and no interest in developing one. He says something about the wall, about the kind of men who stand it, about what a bastard born of nothing brings to a name like Lannister or a house like his. He phrases it as observation rather than attack, which is the coward's method, the way of men who want to wound but leave themselves the door of misunderstanding. He smiles while he says it. The court shifts. Several lords find things to study in the middle distance. Jon does not move. This is the thing that Joffrey does not anticipate, does not know how to read. He is accustomed to flinching, to the immediate capitulation that his position is supposed to purchase, and Jon Snow does not flinch. He meets the king's eyes across the width of the hall, with a steadiness that is not defiance and is not submission, and is somehow more unsettling than either. It is the look of a man who has stood, watches in the dark, at the edge of the world, who is being cold in ways that a throne room cannot approximate, who has already been tested by things that do not respect crowns. The silence stretches. Joffrey's smile loses its footing. He looks away first. He turns it into looking at something else, makes it seem like intention, but the hall has seen it. Jon has seen it. Joffrey has seen himself. The session moves forward. The moment passes into the court's collective memory, where it will stay. The private audience between Tywin and Joffrey happens within the hour, and the walls of Tywin's solar have absorbed many such conversations, but perhaps none so surgical as this one. Tywin does not raise his voice. He never raises his voice. Raising one's voice suggests that the other party has the power to require volume, and Tywin grants no such power to anyone, least of all to a grandson who confuses cruelty with strength. He speaks in the measured, deliberate cadences of a man laying out an argument that he considers already won, the conclusion stated first, and the reasoning provided simply as a courtesy. Jon Snow, he says, is Jon Stark by royal decree, by Joffrey's own royal decree, signed and sealed and entered into the record of the realm. Any insult to Jon Stark in open court is therefore an insult to the decree itself. An insult to the decree is an insult to Joffrey's own word and sovereign authority, and an insult to the strategic alliance that Jon's marriage represents is an insult to Tywin's own work, which is to say, an insult to everything that currently stands between the Lannister hold on the throne and the considerable number of people who would very much like to dismantle it. Joffrey shouts. Something made of glass breaks somewhere in the room. He uses words that kings should perhaps not use in their grandfather's presence, and Tywin lets the words go past him the way a stone wall lets wind go past, with complete indifference. When Joffrey is finished, Tywin simply continues. He does not finish the argument. He does not need to. The argument finished itself before Joffrey entered the room. What Tywin is doing now is allowing Joffrey time to locate his way back to compliance, which Joffrey eventually does, as he always eventually does, because somewhere beneath the performance, he knows the difference between the things he can afford and the things he cannot. The door closes. The solar settles back into its quietness. By evening, the Red Keep has moved through its rhythms, supper and dismissal, and the gradual thinning of corridors as the castle finds its nighttime shape. Jon is in one of the smaller armory annexes, a room barely large enough for a bench and a whetstone, and he is sharpening Longclaw the way men sharpen things when they need their hands to be occupied so their minds can work without interference. The sound of the stone on the blade is slow and even, a small steady sound in a very large night. He does not hear Myrcella approach so much as simply become aware that she is there. She sits beside him on the bench without requesting permission and without announcing herself, and she does not speak, and he does not speak, and this silence is different from the silences of court, which are full of calculation and watching. This one has some quality of rest in it, the way that two people can be quiet together when they have decided to trust the quiet. The whetstone keeps its rhythm. Somewhere in the walls of the keep, something settles. When she finally speaks, Myrcella does not look at him. She looks at her own hands, folded in her lap with the careful composure she was raised to wear. and she says that she is sorry. Not for the mourning specifically, though the mourning is present in the words, for the family she was born into, for what it costs others to be near it, for the things she cannot change that have already cost Jon something today. In a hall full of watching eyes, Jon sets the whetstone down. He holds Longclaw a moment longer, this sword that came to him by chance, or fate, or the particular mercy of a dying man. This sword that has been with him through cold the Lannister children will never understand. And then he sets it down as well, and he turns to look at her. He tells her that the family she was born into is not the family she is building now. He says it simply, without ornament, and Myrcella looks up at him with an expression that is trying very hard not to be moved and is failing quietly, and Jon holds her gaze the same way he held Joffrey's in the hall, with steadiness, except that this steadiness is entirely different in what it is made of. They sit together a while longer in the small room, with the sword between them and the candle burning toward nothing. And outside the walls of the annex, Tywin's castle goes about its nighttime business, and somewhere in it, Cersei is thinking her cold and necessary thoughts, and somewhere in it, Joffrey is already forgetting the lesson of the afternoon, which is its own kind of warning. The warning that a lesson a man forgets once he will forget again, and the third time a lesson needs teaching, it rarely comes from a grandfather's measured voice. The little birds do not sleep. This is the first thing to understand about Varys. Not the silks, not the soft voice, not the practiced helplessness he wears like armor in the presence of men who mistake appearance for fact. The first thing to understand is that his network does not rest when the candles go out, does not pause when the great lords retire to their chambers and believe themselves unwatched. The little birds move through the dark hours with particular fluency, and it is in the dark hours that the most valuable things are said, because men who guard their tongues in daylight grow careless when they believe only the shadows are listening. Ned Stark had spoken at the wall. That much was established before the frost had finished forming on the stones of Castle Black. A whispered exchange between a man who thought himself dying and a boy who thought himself alone. And yet the cold air carries sound with a fidelity that warmer air does not. And one of Varys's little birds had been close enough, not close enough to hear every word, close enough to hear the shape of what was passed between them. Varys had sat with that shape for a long time before he moved on it. He had turned it in his mind the way a jeweler turns an unfamiliar stone, looking for the grain of it, the inclusions, the places where the light did and did not pass. A name, not the name the boy had been given at birth by Eddard Stark's household, not the name that had followed him to Castle Black, not Snow or even Stark. Something else, something older and more dangerous, spoken once at the wall and never written down, buried now in the chest of a man who had ridden south into a marriage alliance that Varys had not yet finished evaluating. He brings the information to Tyrion because Tyrion is the one Lannister still capable of being frightened by the right things. Tywin would weaponize it instantly. That is not a criticism of Tywin. It is simply an accurate description of how Tywin's mind processes advantage, which is to say without pause, without the intermediary step of understanding what the advantage actually costs. Cersei would do something worse than weaponize it, because Cersei operates not from calculation, but from the fear that underlies calculation, and fear in possession of a secret. This size does not strategize. it detonates. Tyrion sits in a small room in the Tower of the Hand and reads nothing that Varys hands him, because Varys hands him nothing. There is no document. There is only Varys standing in the room with his hands folded and his voice very quiet, and Tyrion listening with the particular stillness he reserves for moments when the shape of the world is changing underneath him. He does not speak immediately when Varys finishes. He reaches for his wine and then does not drink it, which is the truest measure of his attention. Rhaegar Targaryen, Lyanna Stark, the boy his father has placed beside Myrcella at the high table, the boy his father has folded into the family's design like a piece that was always meant to occupy that square. That boy carries in his blood the Targaryen line and the Stark line together, two rivers meeting in a single channel, and Tywin Lannister, in all his vast strategic intelligence, had not known, or had not verified, had used the boy as a useful piece, without understanding that the piece was not a knight, that it was something closer to a king. Tyrion finds, to his own mild surprise, that what he feels is not alarm. It is something more complex than alarm. It is a kind of awe, the way a mathematician might feel upon discovering that a proof he thought was merely elegant is in fact fundamental, that it describes not a single phenomenon, but a law. The irony is so complete that it has passed through irony entirely and arrived at something that functions like poetry. Tywin Lannister, who despised the Targaryens, who burned them from Westeros with borrowed swords and borrowed hands, who spent the rest of his life ensuring that no Targaryen ghost could return to haunt his legacy. Tywin Lannister had taken a Targaryen heir into his own household and placed a Lannister granddaughter beside him at his table. There is no version of this that Tywin survives with his pride intact if it becomes known. Tyrion understands this before he has finished processing everything else. He goes to Jon 2 days later, not in the Great Hall, not in any room where the walls serve more than one master. He finds the young man in the yard in the gray morning light, working through forms with a longsword, and he waits until Jon has finished before he speaks. And what he says is not an accusation, and is not a question, and is not a warning in any form that could be quoted back to him in a room with witnesses. He says only that there are people in the world who know more about Jon's birth than they have spoken aloud, and that Jon should take very great care about who learns his full name, his complete name. The name a man might carry if both his parents had been exactly who some people believe them to have been. Jon is still holding the sword. He does not look surprised. He looks instead like a man who has been waiting for someone to finally say the thing that has lived in the room with him for years. And Tyrion watches Jon's face with the attention he usually reserves for hands at a card table. And what he sees there is not shock. What he sees is recognition. And beneath the recognition, something that might be fear, or might be the very first edge of something more difficult to name. The beginning of understanding not what he is, but what that means. Tyrion does not finish explaining. He does not need to. The sword is still in Jon's hand, and the morning is cold and gray, and neither of them says the name aloud. And somewhere above them in the castle, Tywin Lannister is already at his correspondence, already moving pieces across a board that has just become, though he does not yet know it, significantly larger than he designed it to be. The ravens come before the smoke. That is the first thing the small council learns. Not from their own ships, not from their own spies positioned along the eastern coasts, but from a fisherman's boy who ran 17 miles inland, with a story about shadows blotting out the morning sun over Dragonstone, about something vast and winged circling the old Targaryen stronghold before banking south and east toward the Stormland's shore. The boy is brought to King's Landing in a cart, half delirious with exhaustion, and by the time his account reaches the ears of men who know what it means, the ravens are already arriving in clusters. From Storm's End, from Cape Wrath, from every castle along that rocky southern coast. And every raven says the same thing. She has come. The ships are beyond counting. The army that walks behind her does not break formation in the surf. It does not scramble or shout or celebrate landfall the way ordinary soldiers do. It simply walks, row after row, spear after spear, silent as a tide. The small council erupts in the way that small councils always erupt when the thing they feared most stops being theoretical. Voices rise. Accusations of intelligence failure spread across the table like spilled wine. Joffrey stands at the head of the chamber and declares, with the particular confidence of a boy who has never once been seriously afraid of anything real, that the gold of Casterly Rock will buy them 1,000 sellswords for every unsullied she brings across the sea, and the swords of the Reach can hold any beachhead she tries to establish, and he, personally, would very much like to see these dragons as if they are something to be examined rather than survived. Tywin does not respond to this. He does not correct it, does not dismiss it, does not do any of the small visible things a lesser man might do to signal his contempt. He simply continues reading the dispatch in his hands. He reads it to the end. He folds it. He sets it down. And then, when the room has worn itself out on its own noise, he speaks. Quietly, the way a man speaks when he knows that quieter voices travel further, and says only that they will discuss options when the full scope of her landing is confirmed and that the council will meet again at dusk. But Tywin does not wait until dusk. Tywin is not a man who waits. Jon is summoned to the Tower of the Hand before the midday bell, and he comes the way he always moves through this castle. Without rushing, without hesitation, but with something watchful in the way his eyes take the measure of every room he passes through, every guard, every window's angle of light. He is still carrying what Tyrion said to him the morning before. He carries it the way a man carries something heavy that he has not yet decided where to set down. The sword at his hip is his own. The name in his chest is not. Tywin is standing when Jon enters, which is itself a kind of information. He does not gesture toward a chair. He moves instead to the window, and for a moment, both men simply exist in the same space, with the gray autumn light falling between them and the city noise rising faintly from somewhere far below. Then Tywin says what he has brought Jon here to say. He says that she has landed. He says that she carries 3 dragons, each one grown, and he lets that register in the air before continuing. He says that a Targaryen with an army tends to simplify certain complicated questions. Questions about blood, about lineage, about which names matter, and which ones have been buried long enough to stay buried. He turns from the window. His eyes, when they find Jon's face, do not ask a question. They already know. They have already calculated the answer's probable range. What they are doing is something more like confirmation, more like a man checking his arithmetic against a second column of numbers. He tells Jon directly, not cruelly, not gently, simply directly, the way Tywin Lannister has always delivered information that he expects to be used, rather than felt. That if Daenerys Targaryen learns there is a prince of Targaryen blood living inside the walls of King's Landing, married to a Lannister granddaughter, commanding the loyalty of northern men and the respect of the city's small folk, she will not ignore that. She cannot ignore it. A piece that significant does not sit unclaimed on any board Tywin has ever studied. She will reach for him, with an offer or with a threat. And the difference between those two things will depend almost entirely on which way Jon's loyalty falls when she does. Jon listens to all of it. He does not interrupt. He does not flinch when the word loyalty is placed in front of him, like a document requiring a signature. And when Tywin finishes, Jon is quiet for a moment that has weight to it. Not the weight of uncertainty, but the weight of a man ensuring that what he says next is precisely what he means. He was raised in the North. He says this first, and simply, not because it excuses anything, not as a deflection, but because it is the foundation of everything that follows. He says he has no hunger for a dragon throne. He has never dreamed of it. He does not know how to want something that abstract. What he knows is winter. What he knows is the wall, and the men who stand on it, and the people in the villages below who do not care which dynasty holds the capital as long as the harvest comes and the roads stay safe, and their children live past the first cold season. His loyalty, he says, is to those people, not to a name, not to a bloodline, not to Targaryen, not to Lannister, not to any house that has ever put its sigil above the door of a throne room and called that sovereignty. He will not be made into a weapon against Daenerys Targaryen on the basis of suspicion alone, on the basis of what she might do rather than what she has done. And he says this without raising his voice, which somehow makes it land harder than shouting would. Tywin holds his gaze through the whole of it, and then, in the silence that follows, something shifts almost imperceptibly in the old lion's expression. It is not warmth. It is not approval in any form a younger man might recognize. It is the look of a strategist who has heard an answer he did not expect and is rapidly recalculating its value. Honesty in Tywin's experience is either a weakness or a weapon, and what Jon has just given him is honest enough to be dangerous and precise enough to be useful, and Tywin knows the difference. He says then that Jon will have time, not unlimited time. He is careful to make that distinction, but time enough. Time enough for the picture of Daenerys' intentions to come into sharper focus. Time enough for the ravens from the Stormlands to accumulate into something resembling certainty. He does not offer this as a gift. He offers it as a calculation, one that happens to align, for now, with what Jon has asked for. Jon nods. He moves toward the door, and then Tywin speaks one more time, not loudly, not with any special weight in his voice, but with the particular precision of a man who wants to be heard clearly. He says that when the time comes, and it will come, the question of which side of this Jon stands on will not be a question that admits of a careful, considered, measured answer. It will be the kind of question that gets answered in an instant, by instinct, before thought has a chance to dress it up in principles. Jon pauses at the door. He does not turn around. He says that he knows. He walks out into the corridor, and the door closes behind him. And somewhere to the south, the dragons are already over the Stormlands, circling, learning the shape of the land beneath them. And the first of Daenerys' outriders are sending messages back to the fleet. Messages that will eventually be intercepted, that will eventually be decoded, that will eventually land on the desk of a man in the Tower of the Hand who is already, even now, composing his reply to something that has not yet arrived. The message, when it does arrive, is addressed not to Tywin. It is addressed to Jon. The message is short. That is the first thing Jon notices. Not its contents, not the seal, not the careful neutral parchment that suggests it passed through several hands before reaching him, but its brevity. A long letter from Daenerys Targaryen would be a declaration. A short one is an invitation. There is a difference, and Jon understands it the way a man understands weather. Not by reasoning through it, but by having lived long enough in its presence to feel the shift before it arrives. He reads it twice, then he folds it, and he does not show it to anyone. What he brings to Tywin instead is an argument, and he brings it the way a general brings a map, not as a request for permission, but as a presentation of terrain. The council chamber is cold that morning, the kind of cold that settles into stone floors and refuses to leave regardless of the fires burning at either end. Tywin sits at the head of the table. The others arrange themselves in their customary positions, which is to say, they arrange themselves in the order of how much they believe their own opinions matter. Jon stands. He does not sit. Standing is a choice, and every choice in this room is a signal. He lays it out plainly. Daenerys has 3 dragons mature enough to reduce a fleet to drifting ash before the archers have time to knock a second arrow. She has the Unsullied, who do not break, and the Dothraki, who do not tire, and she has something more difficult to account for than either of those. She has a claim that a significant portion of the realm considers legitimate. And legitimacy is the kind of weapon that does not announce itself until it is already inside the gates. Sending an army south is not a strategy. It is a provocation dressed in the language of strategy. It tells her that the city she was born to inherit has decided to answer her return with iron before she has said a single word about what she actually wants. Tywin listens. This is not the same as agreeing. Tywin listening looks almost identical to Tywin calculating the precise cost of disagreement. Jon says that he will go alone, half Stark, half Targaryen, married into neither the Queen's bloodline nor a rival house. He is, in the particular geometry of this moment, the only man in the 7 kingdoms who can stand in front of Daenerys and be believed by both sides of what is coming. He is not her enemy, and he is not her champion. He is something rarer than either. He is a man with no position to defend who is asking her to speak before swords make speaking unnecessary. Tywin's eyes do not move. He says that a man with no position to defend has no leverage. Jon says that a man with no position to defend has nothing to lie about. He lets that sit for a moment, the way a stone sits in still water, and watches the ripples reach the edges of the room. Then he says that he will ride within the week. The road south takes him along the coast, where the sea moves with the slow, indifferent authority of something that has never needed to justify itself. The smell of salt comes off the water in long cold waves. His horse picks its way along the cliff-top paths with the careful attention of an animal that understands heights. Jon rides without an honor guard, without a banner, without the kind of procession that announces its own importance from 3 miles away. He rides as a man rides when he wants to arrive, rather than be seen arriving. He finds her camp on the 3rd day, precisely where the message indicated, in a shallow bay south of Dragonstone, where the cliffs step down to a gray shingle beach. and the sea turns a particular shade of dark green that exists nowhere else in the known world. Daenerys is already there when he arrives. She has been there since dawn. This is also a signal. She is smaller than he expected. This surprises him, and he files the surprise away without allowing it to show on his face. Her silver hair catches the wind, and she does not push it back. She stands at the water's edge with two of the Unsullied at a respectful distance, and her eyes, when she turns to look at him, are the pale violet of a sky just before the light fully leaves it. She does not speak first, neither does he. What passes between them in those first seconds is not conversation. It is something more like assessment. Two people who have spent their lives being read by others, each discovering with some surprise that the person in front of them is doing something more careful than simply looking. She is listening to him stand there. He is listening to her listen. He dismounts. He walks to within speaking distance, and then he says his name, his real name, both of them, the Stark half and the Targaryen half. Quietly, with the same flat evenness he uses for everything, as though the information is simply information. Her face does not break, but something moves behind her eyes. Something that was very still a moment before is no longer quite so still. She looks at him the way a person looks at a thing they believed was lost, finding it in an unexpected place, not quite trusting their own recognition. Her mouth opens slightly, closes. The wind comes off the water. She says, very quietly, that she did not know. He says that most people didn't. The silence that follows is not uncomfortable. It is the silence of two people recalibrating the distance between where they thought they were standing and where they are actually standing. And the beach holds them both, while the dragons circle somewhere far above, their shadows crossing the water like slow, deliberate thoughts. And neither of them moves to fill the quiet yet, because some moments require their full length before anything useful can be said inside them. The ravens fly before dawn. They fly from Dragonstone and from King's Landing, from Winterfell and the Eyrie and the Reach, and they carry the same word in a dozen different hands. Harrenhal, and a date, and the seal of a man who does not hold the Iron Throne, but whose authority in this particular moment exceeds the person who does. Tywin Lannister does not summon kings. He summons outcomes. The distinction matters because lords who might refuse a royal command will sometimes answer a political inevitability, and Tywin has arranged this gathering to feel like the latter, not a command at all, but a conclusion that sensible men are simply arriving to witness. Harrenhal receives them the way it receives everything, with the particular indifference of a ruin that has outlasted too many ambitions to be impressed by one more gathering of powerful people inside its shattered halls. The towers that Balerion melted still lean at their patient angles. The stones that no fire has touched still hold their shadows. Lords from the Stormlands and the Reach set up their pavilions in the outer yards, and Dornish banners hang beside Northern Grey, and the whole enormous wreck of the castle holds all of it without comment, because Harrenhal has seen worse and has learned to wait. Jon and Myrcella arrive together. This is not incidental. The timing of their arrival is deliberate, their horses entering the main gate at the hour when the most eyes are present, when the outer yards are full of lords and retainers who have been watching the road since morning. She rides beside him with her back straight and her Lannister hair catching the pale autumn light, and he rides with the quiet, forward attention he brings to everything. and together they make a particular kind of image. Not performance exactly, but evidence. Some arguments are made with words. Some are made by simply appearing in the same place at the same time, unified, at ease, as though the thing that was supposed to be a political convenience has become instead something that requires no further explanation. The hostile whispers do not disappear entirely. They are never going to disappear entirely. But they quiet. They sink to a register below practical relevance, and Tywin, watching from a height, notes this with the satisfaction of a man who has made exactly the calculation he intended to make. The council runs for 3 days. On the first day, the lords speak about what they fear. This takes the full day. Fear, when it has been accumulating for years, requires considerable time to empty itself into a room, and Harrenhal's great hall is large enough to hold all of it, barely. The northern lords fear southern hands on their grain. The southern lords fear northern coldness spreading into their politics. Everyone fears Daenerys, but in different registers. Some fear the fire, some fear the rupture, some fear simply that the world they have learned to navigate will be replaced by one they haven't. She listens to all of it with the particular stillness of a person who has heard worse things said about her in larger rooms, and her advisors sit at her flanks like parentheses around a word that requires very careful reading. On the second day, Jon speaks. He does not speak at length. He has learned, in the way that some people learn things early and carry them quietly, that the most useful thing a person can do in a room full of competing anxieties is give each of those anxieties somewhere specific to land. He does not promise permanent peace. He does not promise that dragons will never fly over Westeros again. He does not make guarantees that require the future to cooperate with present intentions. What he offers instead is a framework, a postponement of conquest, a recognition of existing governance, a structure for ongoing negotiation that gives every lord in the room the thing they actually need, which is not safety, but the sense that safety might be possible. It is a narrow distinction. In rooms like this one, narrow distinctions are the only kind that matter. Daenerys watches him speak and says nothing until he finishes, and then she says 3 sentences that, in their precision and their brevity, accomplish more than a longer speech would have. She agrees to the framework. She agrees to the postponement. She says, with the particular economy of a person choosing their words, the way a general chooses ground, that she did not cross the narrow sea to make war on people who were willing to treat her as a participant in the realm's future, rather than a threat to its present. The room receives this in silence. Then, slowly, something in the air of Harrenhal begins to change. Not triumph, nothing so clean as that, but the collective exhalation of people who had arrived prepared for a catastrophe and are now revising their expectations downward towards something merely difficult. Tywin calls it an accord. He does not call it a peace. He is too precise a man to call it a peace, because a peace implies permanence, and Tywin deals only in functional realities. But it holds. It holds through the closing formalities and the careful language of the document that 3 Meisters ink before it's signed, and it holds through the banquet on the 3rd evening, where men who arrived as adversaries eat from the same tables without incident. The road home from Harrenhal runs through low hills and thin autumn forest, and Jon's column moves along it in the gray afternoon light of the 4th day, with the specific quiet of people carrying good news carefully, aware that good news is its own kind of fragile thing. Myrcella rides close beside him. The ravens have already gone north and south with word of what was agreed, moving faster than horses always do. And somewhere in King's Landing, a woman is reading the terms by firelight and understanding that the man she was supposed to destroy has instead become the hinge on which the realm has turned. Cersei burns the letter. Then she writes another one. The rider she sends does not carry a raven. He carries instructions, and he rides hard to get ahead of the column before it reaches the crossroads where the valley narrows and the hills press the road down to 2 horses wide, and everything that Tywin built over 3 days at Harrenhal can be unmade in a single moment on a road that no one important is watching. What Cersei does not know, cannot know, because she does not know the shape of the network she has never been able to see, is that a young woman riding in the back of Myrcella's retinue has been awake since before dawn, because a bird came in the night that was not addressed to Jon's maester, and the message inside it was written in a hand that serves no house, and all of them, and the young woman who received it does not hesitate for very long before she moves quietly forward through the column to find the captain of Jon's guard and speak 4 sentences into his ear that change the color of the afternoon entirely. The column slows. The captain sends riders forward along the narrow road. They find the man before he is ready, positioned badly, in the wrong shadow, and he is taken alive, which is the worst possible outcome for the person who sent him, because a dead man points nowhere, and a living one, under the right kind of pressure, points very precisely at the place he came from. Jon sits on his horse at the edge of the road while his guard secures the man, and Myrcella is very still beside him, her eyes forward, her expression doing nothing that it does not choose to do. And the autumn light comes through the bare trees in long cold strips across the road, and neither of them speaks yet, because the man is still being searched, and the evidence is still being assembled. And there is a particular kind of patience required when the confirmation you are waiting for is going to change everything, and it has not quite arrived yet. The man talks before the sun has moved very far across the sky. This is not surprising. The kind of person who agrees to wait in the wrong shadow on a narrow road, positioned badly, hoping for a moment of chaos that never quite arrives, that kind of person has already made the largest decision they were capable of making. And when the moment collapses around them, there is very little left to hold on to. The confession, when it comes, is not dramatic. It rarely is. It is a series of small practical facts delivered in the voice of someone who understands that the only remaining currency they possess is information, and they are spending it carefully, hoping it buys something worth having. It buys very little, but it buys enough. It points precisely where Myrcella's stillness had already suggested it would point, and the riders that peel away from the column that afternoon carry sealed letters that will arrive in the capital well ahead of any denial, and that is the last significant resistance the journey home encounters. Tywin Lannister receives the confirmation in his solar 3 days before Jon and Myrcella reach Winterfell. He reads the letter once, sets it face down on the desk, and sits for a long time with his hands folded in front of him. He does not summon anyone immediately. He allows himself the private duration of a single candle burning low before he begins to write his responses, because even Tywin Lannister, in his most methodical moments, understands that some things require a breath before the machinery begins to turn. What he writes that evening sets in motion a sequence of consequences so clean, so structurally inevitable, that those who later study this period of history will find themselves marveling not at the boldness of the move, but at the patience required to wait for precisely the right moment to make it. Cersei had believed herself protected by proximity to power. She had not understood until it was far too late that proximity to Tywin Lannister is only protection when Tywin Lannister has decided your survival is useful. He had decided otherwise. He had decided it quietly over months as the evidence accumulated and the alternative became clear, and when the letter arrived confirming what the rider from the narrow road had offered up so readily, there was no anger in Tywin's expression. There was only the particular, colorless satisfaction of a man who has correctly read the board from a very long distance and watched the pieces arrive at precisely the positions he anticipated. He would say years later, in the rare moments when he permitted himself the luxury of retrospect, that the marriage of Myrcella to Jon Snow was the most consequential political arrangement he had ever made, greater than alliances sealed with gold, greater than campaigns won with steel, greater than any treaty he had ever compelled a defeated enemy to sign. What armies could not accomplish across generations of grinding, costly war, a single marriage had achieved in less than 2 years. The Stark name and the Lannister name, which had existed in the realm's imagination as the opposite ends of something, honor and cunning, north and south, winter and gold, now bent toward each other along a line drawn by two young people who had not chosen each other but had chosen, slowly and with increasing deliberateness, to become something together that neither could have been alone. Tywin does not say this with sentiment. He says it as a strategist identifies a successful theory, plainly, precisely, and without apology for the cost it required. The cost was Cersei. He does not linger on this. Jon and Myrcella arrive at Winterfell as the first true snow begins to fall. Not the suggestion of snow, not the cold threat of it that had followed them north through the increasingly bare landscape, but snow itself, real and unhurried, descending in large soft flakes that settle without sound over the gray stones of the yard and the dark bare branches of the godswood and the ancient walls that have stood in this place longer than any living memory can account for. Jon rides through the gates of Winterfell and feels something shift in his chest that he does not immediately have a name for. He has been many things in this castle. He has been the bastard boy who slept in the rooms no one quite claimed for him, who trained in the yard alongside brothers he loved, while carrying the particular, exhausting weight of knowing he did not belong to this place the way they did. He has been the secret at the center of a story he was not permitted to read. He has been the piece moved across other people's boards without his knowledge or consent. He walks the battlements that evening while Myrcella stands beside him and the snow falls quietly into the courtyard below, and he looks out over the rooftops of Winterfell and understands, with a clarity that requires no announcement, that he is none of those things any longer. He is the lord of this place. He is the son of Lyanna Stark, who loved these gray walls and this cold sky, and the particular quality of silence that Winterfell holds inside it like something sacred. He is the husband of a woman who came north a stranger and chose, deliberately, to become someone this castle could belong to. The great gray stones do not feel borrowed anymore. They feel like what they are. Myrcella leans her head against his shoulder and says, It is exactly as he described it. Jon holds her hand and says nothing, because the quiet between them has become something neither of them expected when this all began. A home, freely chosen, built from the wreckage of other people's wars, standing now in the snowfall like it has always been there, like it always will be, while the white world settles soft and still around it. And that brings us to the end of this story. If you enjoyed it and made it all the way here, please consider subscribing to the channel. I upload new alternate history and lore videos every single day. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.